And so for more on this, we reached William Hamilton. He was born in Toronto but lives mainly in Calgary. He and his wife have taught English in Russia since 2014. And in January of this year, when he was first able to get a vaccine, he rolled up his sleeves and got it done. Now, we reached William in Khimki, Russia, which is just outside of Moscow. Hello to you.
RT, thank you for having me on today.
So why don't we start with when you got vaccinated? Tell me a little bit about that process. It was back in January for you.
That's correct. The Sputnik V vaccine is a viral vector vaccine requiring 2 shots to take full effect. It was released to healthcare professionals in December of 2020 and offered for the general public starting in January of 2021. Now, as someone who teaches English for a living and sometimes has to be around people in a room, I saw it as an important professional responsibility to obtain a vaccination as soon as I could. And so when the opportunity arose in January to obtain the first stage of the 2-shot procedure, naturally I jumped right in.
And I imagine perhaps part of that decision, too, might have been with the fact that you, of course, would want to come home at some point, too. And maybe that was part of your thought process, of course, the professional responsibility you're talking about, but also wanting to come back to Canada. Was that going through your mind as you went through whether or not to get inoculated as soon as possible?
That was a factor I considered. But the work that I do here has kept me busy enough that I wanted the latitude and the opportunity to make a return visit to Canada at some point in the summer. I wanted to have that closed.
And now, we were speaking a little bit earlier that your wife is actually back in Canada right now. What was that process like?
Well, what I can tell you is that she left the Russian Federation on March 13th. So that she could obtain a new work visa to return to Russia. Now, what happened, of course, was that as the pandemic escalated, international borders started closing left, right, and center, and my wife's family actually had to arrange for her accommodation in a hotel in a quarantined location while she was in the air on the way from Warsaw to Toronto. And so, as part of that process, what she endured basically was 2 weeks of what a lot of Canadians are encountering now over the course of a 3-day period, essentially restricted to one room with only occasional steps outside for fresh air. Now, in time, of course, she was able to leave the hotel, but it was an unanticipated expense and an unanticipated surprise for everyone involved.
And you're saying that this was a surprise in particular because you were both fully vaccinated, and so you imagined that it wouldn't necessarily apply to you because you had been fully vaccinated. So how did you realize that because this vaccine wasn't recognized by Health Canada or authorized for use by Health Canada, that even you, if you wanted to come home, would have to set up and do the hotel quarantine?
Okay, well, just to clarify one point, Arthi, my wife obtained her vaccination in Ontario after she had landed. But as for myself, and again, my wife returned in March 2020 to Canada.
Yes.
Okay, so just so we're clear on that point. But I found it immensely frustrating to find out that I, like so many other Canadians abroad, had done the right thing, had done the responsible thing. Ensure that we were keeping ourselves and our friends and neighbors and colleagues safe from COVID transmission, only to find that for whatever reason, the Canadian government has not seen fit to validate a vaccine that has been demonstrated to be safe and effective in The Lancet, in Nature, in various other medical journals. It's proven to be safe, it's proven to be effective. I think we're all a little flummoxed as to figuring out what the problem actually is.
I can only imagine how frustrating this has been for you and your family. What sort of advice might you have for other Canadians who are abroad and hoping to come home?
My advice to my fellow Canadians is to get whatever shot you have handy. The best vaccination is the one you can get into your arm. In terms of figuring out how you're going to get back to Canada, that obviously is an issue you're going to have to plan very carefully. I mean, certainly, I don't appreciate the notion that I would have to be $1,000 out of pocket just for the privilege of stepping back onto home soil. I'm very lucky to be in a position where I can afford it. But there are a lot of people in this business working abroad who are not, and who are going to be in hardship and distress as a result of the refusal of Canadian health authorities to take a look at the broader picture and to determine what is actually safe and effective.
Well, you know, Mr. Hamilton, we know so many Canadians living abroad who are in a similar situation as you are and are grappling with this. So we really appreciate you sharing your experience with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.